right, we're live. Hey everyone, welcome to another Webflow community live stream. I'm your host Nelson. Thank you for joining me this week. These are big streams because at the end of every quarter we have our CEO Vlad Magdalin come and answer some of your questions, and he answers it live. So it's pretty cool that we can have that direct connection to one of our co-founders. So before I get him on the stream and before we start answering a lot of your questions, let's go to my browser and just want to remind you guys that webflow.com/updates. If you want to see what we've been working on since 2013 when we first launched, you can see it here, webflow.com/updates. And this quarter, man, the team has been really busy, starting out with custom search result description fields, but the big one right here, copy and paste between projects, that was a huge one. Another huge thing, and I think that everyone likes, is GDPR. So we had to work on that one. Search within the pages panel. So a lot of cool things that happened this quarter. And we want to know, as all Webflow fans want to know, what's happening for the next quarter and maybe Q4. And that's why we have these quarterly live Q&As with Vlad. So let me get Vlad in here. All right. Oops. There we go. Oh, hey. Hey, Vlad.
Hey, everyone.
How you doing?
How are you?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, so a lot of big things are happening, and I think people just want to go straight into the questions. So, you ready for this?
Absolutely.
All right, let's go. All right, first one. And just a reminder to everyone who's in the Crowdcast chat room, please post your question by clicking on Ask a Question link below. And if your question is already similar to someone who already asked it, go ahead and upvote it instead of asking it again, okay? So we're going to start from the top and work our way to the bottom. Let's do this. So the first one from Stu with 5 upvotes. Unless you're about to blow us away with the e-commerce beta release date, how is it actually shaping up? What's the percentage left to solve, etc.?
Good question. So even though Nelson didn't mention it in the last quarter, that was the vast majority of the engineering work that we've been doing the last 9 months now, or even more. So it's definitely shaping up. We have one huge the checkout piece to get everything integrated with Stripe. The hard part there is getting everything to be stylable while still being PCI compliant, which is an interesting challenge because it's the first time that Webflow does anything in kind of an iframe that's an iframe with still having all the design control that we're promising for e-commerce. So we're getting close to a world where it's actually working end to end, but we still, it's one of those, you know, we can't share a release date because we actually have the final code in place, so we don't know exactly when we're going to ship it. But as soon as we have a working alpha version, that's when we start to roll it out to, you know, tens, hundreds, etc. E-commerce is probably our biggest feature to date with the most complexity, you know, much more complicated than the CMS, which was mostly just presentational. Commerce has things like taxes and shipping and orders and so much stuff like company setup. There's cross border stuff, currency stuff, a ton of complexity to worry about. But we're definitely getting, you know, if I was to put a percentage on it, without maybe giving some false hope or incorrect information, I'd probably peg it at 75, 80% in terms of like all the big pieces that we have left minus the polish. But you know, as these things go with software, it's we have to cross that bridge when we get there. So when it's closer to being done, we can share more timelines. But it's the top priority in the company We're not stopping work on other features by a long shot, which we'll talk about some other ones like CSS Grid in a second. But it's definitely the most critical project that a lot of our team members are focusing on.
Yeah, it sounds really complicated when you tell us all about the little details that need to be hit and make sure that that's all working. Yeah, so everyone's waiting for it.
When people's money is involved, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. That is, very, very sensitive and making sure everything is super secure and just works flawlessly. And
there is a feature we can ship sooner. It's e-commerce minus like actually being able to take a payment. If you all want that, we can probably ship that soon. But I don't know if anybody actually.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think so. We need to do the whole thing from end to end, like you said.
The E part. That would just be the E part.
So
without the.
So the E and so Webflow electronic.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the question, Stu. All right. Next one. Here we go. This is a good one from Antonio. Roadmap for keyboard accessibility. For example, drop downs or accordions made with Webflow interactions are not accessible via keyboard.
Yes. So we, this is very important for us. We see it as our responsibility, especially in the long term. The more plugins we create, the more we get out there, the more kind of the first party to make sure that we get that stuff right from the beginning. Unfortunately, when we were first getting started 5 years ago, components were developed. Honestly, we're just trying to stay afloat, trying to ship features as quickly as possible and cover as many use cases as quickly as possible. So unfortunately, accessibility and things like testing with screen readers wasn't necessarily top of mind at that time. But right now, one of the big goals, and I've talked about this, I think the last couple of Q&As, is a lot of the company's time is going towards a new plugin architecture internally for now. But one of the goals of the plugin architecture is completely isolated to where all of the component from creating the DOM structure, the behavior that you would typically think of as JavaScript or styling, all the components that make up that thing that you're using in the designer, in the ad tab, icons, all the behavior that relates to a component would be encapsulated in one plugin. And Ecommerce is actually our first feature where 100% of the new elements that are going onto the canvas, things like cart, checkout, all the fields, the add to cart button, they're all in this new plugin sort of constraint. And one of the goals of that architecture is to make sure that we build in centrally things like accessibility and multi-language support, et cetera. So horizontally, these plugins are kind of multifaceted, and if you write a correct plugin, you have to cover all these bases correctly. Unfortunately, that's not going to be retroactively applied to all the current controls, which we're trying to figure out how to migrate to the new plugin architecture. So that's still it's still a big TBD. We have to figure out how to do that. But worst case scenario, you'll kind of drag in a like a version 2 of a dropdown, which will be completely accessible, and but it will have a slightly different structure. You might have to move some of your classes around. That's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario is we figure out a way to migrate the existing components into kind of this new plugin architecture without with them being completely backwards compatible, if that's possible. Some situations that might not be possible, some situations that might be, but it all depends on which of these components come out first. Like we have some planned, like CMS Gallery, which will be a new component, which we can look at all of these considerations up front and make sure we get them right, including multi-language, including CMS binding, including accessibility, etc. and then we'll have to see how that will follow up with existing components like dropdowns, etc. There are some changes we can make now for the dropdowns that I think, and we don't actually have accordions, so I'm not quite sure, Antonio, what you meant by accordions. But I think there are some specific things we can look into with dropdown support. Another thing I want to remind you of, we have custom attributes. So currently you can work around some of these limitations by adding things like ARIA attributes to your existing Webflow components, just to make them more, depending on the context that you're using them in, making them more friendly to screen readers. But unfortunately, it is something that we haven't done in a first-class way in the existing legacy components. But changes are coming. I think the future of all Webflow components is that they're accessible by default, and we're creating this architecture being mindful of that consideration. But unfortunately, that takes some time.
Right. Thank you for the question. With 4 upvotes from Philip, this is a good one. CSS Grid. How are we doing with that?
What's CSS?
Oh, okay. Well, back in the day, someone wrote something, and then the web became tableless.
Right. CSS Grid is in very active development. I think it's going to be one of our, in most, for lack of a better, I don't want to exaggerate, but to me, the change between Flow to CSS Grid is almost profound. Like it's just so much faster. So that is in active development. We're targeting somewhere in the fall for a release. Again, dependent on how progress keeps going. There are some changes that we're making to the style tab to get ready for CSS Grid. The CSS Grid adds a new, another layout mode on top of kind of what we already have, block, inline block. So there were some parts that were becoming really crowded, and Grid introduces a lot of different layout modes. There's like grid template areas. There's on-canvas control, so you can very quickly manipulate your grid. It's very cool. But in order to make that happen, we some parts of the style tab. That's still in very active development, and we're going to be rolling out some not updates, but like some announcements on things that are coming, so it's not a big surprise.
Yeah. All right. So the fall, people are going to hold you against that. That's what's always scary about release dates.
We are targeting the fall, and
targeting. All right. This is a good one right here from Jorn. Pagination is in development. Yay! Does that mean it is ready to be developed or be researched first? What time frame do we expect here?
So it's researched. It's actually starting development. So we have everything we need to make it go forward. Like I mentioned before, with all new things, we're shooting to make them into this plugin architecture. Pagination will be one of those. Mm-hmm. There are some, tie-ins that it has to our kind of core code, but it is full, I guess, full development. Time frame, it's hard to say again, but it would be personally awesome. Like we are definitely want to have it before e-commerce, because it's very, we're almost treating it as part of e-commerce because it's so important for product listings and grids and seeing a lot of products on a page. So it's ASAP. Let's just say that.
Okay. All right. Well, it's good to know that it's being thought about for e-commerce. Because like you said, like no one wants to just see like a limited amount of products, and then you have to make another static page for other products. So that's good.
So some limitations on pagination. In order to ship it sooner, we cut some things out of scope, like infinite scrolling. You know, like some pagination. You know, as you scroll down, it sort of kind of takes a show more button and removes it. And we're keeping it to standard pagination. You know, like where you have a collection list and you can have a bunch of pages, next, previous, etc.
Oh no.
Virtual pagination, where you know, sometimes you might see blog posts where you go to a blog post and then it says on that blog post on the detail page it might say next post or something like that.
Yeah.
That's not exactly a pagination control. It's almost like you have to keep context where you started that pagination. Like maybe you went to a list of featured blog posts. So that gets more like really complicated. So the first release is going to be all around. I have a collection list, and there's a directly attached pagination list that affects the query of that collection list. So it'll be relatively straightforward, available, you know, like current page, etc. Next pre. But yeah, that's the.
Okay, cool. All right. Jordan, I already answered one of your questions, so I have to be fair and answer someone else's. Let's go to Daniel Wilkinson. Okay, so Daniel's asking, any projections to when e-commerce is being released? So we already answered that. Holding 2 to 3 projects as really. Okay, so we've already answered this. There is no set time for e-commerce, but we are working on it, Daniel. Let's see here. Okay, this is a good one from Bill Scholler is asking, any chance of white labeled preview URLs for using our domain name, like a coming soon, instead of a subdomain of webflow.io?
I think we did some research into this, and like the infrastructure piece is pretty complicated. So if we were to have something like this, it would be kind of one of those enterprise features where we have to manually set up a domain. So it would say, you know, projectx.vladswebdesignshop.com or something like that. So maybe like we'd have to find out what the demand for something like this is, and whether it depending on how much it would take on each individual basis to create something like this, because we have security considerations. You know, every time you run one of these sites, we have to allow you to run the editor on that site if you hit the editor link when it's in staging, and that involves a bunch of engineering around, you know, how do we store these like session cookies, and whenever a new domain is involved, things get a bit more complicated. So that's something we're considering, but I think if we were to add it, it would be on some sort of, you know, agency, like new agency plan or something, where or like an add-on where it would have a provisioning cost for us to figure that out. But right now, I think when we last researched it, there wasn't that much demand for it, and for the amount of work that it would take on an individual, like every time a new domain has to be provisioned, it would be pretty cost prohibitive. We do have a way to do that now if you're using custom domains.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Which honestly would work out to be cheaper anyway than what it would cost us for our engineers to provision custom domains anyway. So for example, if you have, let's say I have vladswebdesignshop.com as a custom domain, what I can do is I have a new project like Project X. I can set that up as a CNAME on my DNS provider. Let's say it's name. I can point that to Webflow's, SSL proxy. And then for my client project, I can add a new custom domain and say Project X .vladswebdesignshop.com, and then publish to that subdomain or publish to that publish target, and then share that link. Of course, that requires which is the some people might see that as a drawback, but then you would just switch that to the actual custom domain once it's done.
Yeah,
because you're paying for hosting anyway.
Yeah, that's the. I think that's the part people were mainly talking about for that kind of question is they would have to pay for a separate hosting fee, and
separate hosting fee, but we had to set up a custom domain. It would probably be even more expensive. Like it'd be on like I don't know $100 a month plan or something like that, or even more.
Yeah.
Just having done the math before on technically what it would take to set up those kinds of subdomains.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Next one from, let's go. Pablo is asking, adding a fourth breakpoint. I think we already have 4, Pablo, but maybe he's talking about the larger breakpoint, and we've spoken about this in previous quick Q&As.
Yeah. As you can tell, it kind of stresses me out.
Oh no.
Compared to Ecommerce, CSS Grid, I'll tell you why this is really complicated. When thinking about breakpoints, there's different modes for how inheritance works. There's mobile first, where you start with a mobile break.
Mm-hmm.
Have Bootstrap 4 and all these latest frameworks. They're quite developer oriented, and we found that in our research to think like bottom up, unless they're very experienced. At some point, it might make sense for us to offer an option to start mobile first, in which case it's unlimited because there's a unidirectional inheritance flow. So I start with like my smallest phone, then I go to phone landscape, then tablet landscape, et cetera, et cetera. The challenge for us with a larger breakpoint is that Webflow has a main breakpoint, which is desktop, and then we flow down, so it inherits down to tablet, phone, etc. When we add a new one, we've been trying to figure out a way how to like smoothly and naturally add this new breakpoint, and because it's not really possible to make that the new default and flow all the way down, because more than 50% of Webflow users don't have screens large enough to fit anything with the toolbars to fit anything larger than what we currently have, which is like 1400 pixels. So, and that's still like current modern, the way that the kind of laptops and screen resolution change that much, even though a lot of people have like large external monitors. So we have to figure out a way for like a bi-directional flow where you still keep your main breakpoint. That way we don't break existing sites, or open a site in a large breakpoint and make that the default, and then open it up in a smaller monitor, go change the default, and you get into like this mess of some of my main settings are on my small desktop, and then you don't really know what the source of truth is. So we've been trying to figure out a way, like we've done some prototyping around like zooming so that we can actually zoom out the entire canvas to fit any sort of breakpoint, but then you have to like work in a zoom out state. We've done some prototypes around like having the ability to scroll around to always see but that gets kind of messy to see your entire canvas. But the closest solution we have is where we keep treating the desktop breakpoint as the main one, and then we have a kind of flow down for the smaller ones and flow up. So you would still have the adjustments for the larger screen and make those adjustments. Then when you go back to your main one, it would still kind of, that would be the main breakpoint that the values are.
Okay.
So that it's still in like very active discussions, but unfortunately it's not being developed right now, just because other priorities kept coming up, like e-commerce and CSS.
Totally understand.
We're not forgetting about it. It's just unfortunately hasn't hasn't had like a concrete definition yet.
Yep. Totally understandable. All right. Okay, skipping that other question from Pablo. Chucky, okay, here we go. Chucky is asking, can you give us assurances that you will never sell out to Microsoft?
Actually, I don't think we announced early on we're selling to Adobe Muse. Just kidding. That's
you did no, you didn't. You didn't. All right.
So here's what I'll say. We've said many times that Webflow is not in it to have some sort of quick flip or exit. We've already said no to like a lot of big players in the space. We have a much larger, grander vision of being able to make not just websites and not just web apps, but a lot of software development visual, which is going to take a long time to software development. The thing we can't say is like, hey, I guarantee we're not going to sell at any time ever, because I don't know what happen. What I can say is that we can commit to supporting the users and customers that we already have in our community. We've never even gotten past like a 1% likelihood that we would even consider something external or anything close to that, because we love what we're working on. We see that we only built like maybe 5% of what we want to build, and we have so much more left to build. And any sort of acquisition would likely involve shutting down parts of our vision and potentially just like funneling a bunch of our technology to some other application. Like, I don't know, I would be 1,000 times less excited about making Google Sites a little bit better, like giving it better design control than working on our actual kind of grand vision of making software development more visual. But you know, let's just play devil's advocate here. If somebody comes to us with like $50 billion tomorrow, like that's kind of I'm sure those are like ridiculous numbers. No company has ever been sold for that much, but you can't make any guarantees.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Yeah. I can just only speak to our commitment and what we love working on. And for us, work is so exciting. And we feel that it would be stifled if it was somehow serving some other company's purpose. And luckily, we're at a point where we're cash flow positive. We have no reliance on investors. Thankfully, we're supported by our wonderful customers, and we serve at your pleasure.
Yeah.
So we thankfully you're keeping us in business, beholden to other interests. So as long as we can keep doing that and we can mutually be beneficial to each other, the sky's the limit. I don't see any reason for us to sell, especially to Microsoft.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Another fascinating thing to hear is you said that it's about like 5% of what we want to do. And so if you do the simple math, Webflow will be 5 years old in August. So 1% each year. So when we're 100 years old, we'll have everything done.
Yes. And by that time, technology will advance so much that there will be even more to do.
So we'll just stay at 5% the whole time.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. A lot of upvotes for Mitch's question. Here we go, Mitch. Any roadmap for CMS Sliders and CMS Gallery? And I think you mentioned this in a previous Q&A that we're having a new field in the CMS for a bunch of images.
Yep. Yeah. Image sets.
Yeah.
Image fields. It'll basically power a lot of our CMS like lightboxes. You'll be able to just link a lightbox instead of adding assets individually. You can just link them on like a detail page or a collection list. It'll be in the CMS. Same thing with CMS Gallery. It's going to be powered by that image set field when you want it to be, when you want it to be dynamic. CMS Slider at some point will catch the entire idea for all of our components is those things that can be dynamic will become dynamic. It's just a matter of timing. I think what I mentioned around our kind of approach to plugins or components is that we want to validate the new API on new stuff like CMS Gallery, and then kind of work it backwards to things that we already have. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. But image of that infrastructure, and that's already in active development.
Okay, all right. Let's go to the next one. Again, skipping Jordan. You already asked one. Okay, ooh, this is a good one. From GoCool is asking with 4 upvotes, feature update for multilingual sites with the same URLs. And I think people are using third-party programs like Bablick or something to do multilingual sites, or just creating subfolders within their Webflow sites to make multilingual sites. So how are we doing on that?
So I'm not quite sure what the same URL part means. I think you can already do the same URL thing with you know, some of the JavaScript-based solutions today. I forget what the most popular one is. But our approach to multi-language is actually not same URL. Like, we have a URL-based way to differentiate between which language you're currently visiting. So when you switch from English to, let's say, Spanish, your URL actually changes. That way, if you share that link, that URL will come along a local thing. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure what and multi-language is something that is in very active research and development stage right now. By development, I don't mean like it's actually being implemented in our main code base, but we're trying a lot of different variations in like prototype phase to figure out exactly what the right approach is. But as far as I know, it will not have the same URLs, which I think is how like the best practice for multi-language sites is to actually have separate, distinct URLs for each content path, even to the point where, let's say, if I have a blog post in English and I have a blog post in Spanish, I should have control over something like the slug. Yeah. So it would be, you know, my blog / ES for Spanish / blog / some Spanish language kind of slug that's accessible to those.
Yeah. Okay. Next one. Let's see here. Any more upvotes? Let's see here. Skipping that one. I think. Let me just read this. I think Kajil. I put Webflow updates into categories. Updates. Do you think in the same lines? What should be the next update? Do you want to answer that one? Which one? I'm so Kajil saying, I put Webflow updates in 2 categories: things that makes making websites faster and small iterations, and number 2, updates that give you the options to make more advanced websites, get to work with new clients, and open up new segments of options like e-commerce and booking services. Do you think in the same lines when you prioritize what should be in the next update? Now I get it. Yeah.
Yes, we almost always we consider many different kind of prioritization levers or bits of information to decide what to part we want to. So the wish list is a major portion of that because we get to see you know, where customer demand is. We think of opening up new use cases as the main thing when covering new features. So things like e-commerce, things like site search, things like CMS, etc. Things that aren't currently possible. They're possible with code or some other platforms, but not possible with Webflow. We feel that it's usually better to have a solution faster, new use case, than have the perfect solution or no solution at all with like a bunch of small enhancements and features on top of things that we already have. Which is why sometimes you'll see us spending more time on things like e-commerce versus optimizations, like perhaps moving font management from the dashboard to the
designer.
Which will happen. It just might happen at a slower pace, because being able to do something is more important than kind of doing an existing thing like perfectly, I guess.
Yeah.
So for us, I would say like more than 80% of the work that we do falls into the category of like really broad use cases around being able to get more clients, being able to versus just improving kind of the small iterations or making your design life easier. Things like CSS Grid sort of fall in the middle because they're technically a design tool feature, so they make you a web design, but they're actually kind of horizontally helpful across many different features or use cases. Like I want to make a grid of products, and things like a multi-row grid of products that are aligned visually the right way are pretty hard to do in Flexbox, because Flexbox is very row specific.
Yeah.
So if you have some things that overflow in row 3, and then that goes to CMS Gallery and eventually things that are more complex, zones, etc. So the foundational, even though they might seem like or it be in this category of making websites faster, they actually benefit a lot of these broader features that help you get more work faster.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Next one. This one's getting a lot of votes. It's from Brandon. Any thoughts on when a secure zone/login function will be available, or is that part of the process with e-commerce sites? So I'm guessing making Webflow more like a web app builder where people can register to make a user account and have their own custom dashboard, etc.
So this one's kind of nuanced. I think in a previous Q&A, maybe two quarters ago, I said we're not going to be working on user registration account, which was towards the top of our wish list in the next year or so. Like it's something that we tagged as future. And that's still true if you think of user accounts as like this broad thing, like I'm going to build a twitter.com or an Airbnb with like full on user generated content and accounts, etc. But with e-commerce, especially when Business Catalyst was shut down or announced that they were shutting down, and Secure Zones is a major portion of that platform, we reevaluated how much it would make sense to actually take off chunks of our like bigger vision for user accounts or for like full user generated type of applications with authentication systems, etc. How do we take a subset of that and solve some kind of lower hanging fruit use cases now? And Secure Zones is like a much smaller part of kind of our ultimate vision for user accounts. So what we're doing is for e-commerce, we're creating something we call customer management, which is the initial sort of groundwork for what will become like the ability for end users or site visitors to log in, create accounts, and things like that. So we are definitely thinking about setting the foundation. And I think the delta between having those user accounts already and then jumping into somehow maybe extending our password protected pages functionality to take into account certain parts, whether your specific user account is allowed into a specific secure zone, which controls specific routes on the page. So that is definitely, like, I can't say anything very concrete about where that's going, but we are thinking about it with e-commerce being the first kind of major step into that direction.
Cool. Yeah. All right, Brandon. Hopefully that answers your question. We're going down to this is a good one from Donald. Any plans to implement a sub-collection list in order to be able to create subcategories and more complex architectures for better filtering options?
So there are two things there. We are working on something called nested collection lists, which is the ability, like, let's say if you have a field that is a multi-reference, being able to repeat, let's say I have a post and each blog post has multiple authors. Grid of blog posts or a list of blog posts, and then drag in another collection list inside, and then bind that to the list of authors within each post. We're dealing with a bunch of kind of performance considerations there. There are, because that can like really, like for example, a lot of feature to kind of some extremes where they might have many collection lists on the same page, partly to work around like the lack of pagination, sometimes just to get much more than 100 items.
Yeah.
But so you can imagine, like, if you have 100 items per list, and then you have 10 of those lists, and then in each one of those lists you have 100 other items per each one of those items, that page is going to take a while to load. So we're trying to find ways to make those limits itself in the foot, or make it really tough for your visitors to have to wait forever to get a page to load all of its data.
Yeah.
The sub-collection list, I'm not quite sure what it would be great to see the exact use case there to figure out what kind of architecture is not supported. I know we don't support kind of like many-to-many tables or those kinds of relationships where you can make kind of like an intermediate collection to link to other collections in a sort of loose way. Have this, multi-reference collection that I mentioned, which could already be like the sub-collection list feature, because it actually is a list in a collection, and it's well typed. Like, you choose what type of objects go into that. So it would be good to kind of hear more details on what the actual request is.
Yeah, Donald, if this doesn't answer your question, go ahead and post it on the forums, forum.webflow.com. And
one thing, I think we have some changes coming to be able to filter by item reference fields. So right now our filters are specific to like first order. Share wrong information there. I need to look at it.
All right. Thank you, Donald, for that question. We're going to go to Mooney with 2 upvotes. Will a code editor ever be implemented to be able to edit both visually and through code?
I want to say never, but one of our goals with Webflow has been to force ourselves to come up with visual abstractions that code is inevitably always needed for very complex use cases. So that's why we have things like the custom code embed, dynamic embeds, etc. So you can do quite a lot with custom code. The problem with the code editor is that once you go in that direction, there are so many things that you can do in a code editor that it's just like impossible for an application like Webflow to fully understand. So let's say I open up a code editor and all of a sudden I drop in, I don't know, like a React component with a kind of the latest and greatest ES6 module type of import that works in Chrome. And it might work in a CodePen or something like that, but when you look at it in Webflow, Webflow has no way to interpret what's actually happening.
Yeah.
So for us, we've had a much bigger focus on bringing with what you can do with code, or at least like some of the major use cases. But we don't solve a ton of problems, especially for our kind of collection of user segments or customer segments that we serve on IDE experience over the code. Because over time, our entire mission is to make code a lot more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Entirety of the world's population. Right now, code is only understood by 1 out of every 400 people on Earth. And if we double down and make that a first-class citizen in Webflow, we're sort of almost de facto saying that those trends will have to persist. Whereas we want to make that 1 out of every 50 people should have access to this kind of power. Maybe 1 out of every 1 person should have the ability to learn this kind of thing. And when you involve code, it's just there's so many paths that you can take to mess up that it's just very, very hard to capture that in something that can be one-to-one to a visual paradigm. The thing that's cool about a visual paradigm and where code has been going lately is that a lot of like React, Vue, Flux, GraphQL, etc. They've been moving to these what's called declarative forms of programming, where you sort of like declare the state of how you want things to be reflected, and then you don't have to a computer. It just sort of like reinterprets your declaration. Like CSS is very declarative. Like no matter how your HTML changes, your declaration for how your rules apply to whatever people type in the editor or like a new blog post or whatever, your declaration of your styles will be respected. Yeah. You don't have to write extra code that says like, oh, if I have this to it. And similar things have been happening with programming in general. And I think the only way to really enforce kind of like a full move to declarative programming is to kind of add some constraints to what you can do, so that it's not easy to go into a code editor and just like, you know, take shortcuts or introduce side effects and things like that. I mean, code will always be necessary. Something like Webflow, like it's very unlikely. Just like 3D printers can't print themselves, it's unlikely that most 3D printers can print themselves. Most good ones. It's unlikely that code will be fully capture the flexibility and power of it, and make the normal humans.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I totally feel you on that. Like, having more people build for the web rather than less, and then it doesn't have to be codeless, but you still need to know the fundamentals of code to actually understand it. And I think it's the same thing with every other industry. And you've done a presentation, and it's on our YouTube channel if you search for it, at the Future of Web Design. Vlad gave a talk a couple years ago in London, and he speaks more about this. So you might want to check it out after this stream. Just search on our YouTube channel for Future of Web Design, or what was the name of the?
I think, yeah, I'd have to look.
Yeah. I'll post it in the description below, and also post it on our forum, Twitter, and all that stuff. Yeah, I'll shout it out there. All right, let's see here. By
the way, I'm happy to answer some of these like highly voted ones.
Oh yeah. Okay, we'll go back to Jorn. I just wanted to give everyone a chance though, because if
I can make more time too.
Okay, all right. So we're going to Jorn's question right here. I really want to use the billing feature, client billing feature. But when the client doesn't get a proper receipt, it is not usable. Any news about this?
Proper receipt. I honestly don't know that much about the exact flow of what's received and what's not. But for e-commerce, we're introducing a whole new kind of a customizable email, receipt, order confirmation, etc. Mm-hmm. So if it's something that we'll see a lot of overlap. with the e-commerce. And I think we're also on annual billing for client billing, which right now is not an option for hosting.
Mm-hmm.
But it just had a ton of edge cases for various reasons because of our Stripe integration, with how everything, like how those subscriptions work. But yeah, I would need to look into this. It just seems odd that like there's no option to send receipts.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to Daniel. Ability to implement schema markups on CMS collection pages.
Not quite sure what exactly that question is asking, but again, custom attributes allow you to add any sort of custom markup to the collection detail. I'm not quite sure exactly what schema markups.
Maybe Daniel's unfamiliar with the custom attributes, but if you click on an element and then click on the settings panel on the right, there is a spot in the bottom right that lets you add a custom attribute to any of your elements. So maybe that's what he's asking about. And if that's not it, Daniel, go ahead and like I say to all the questions, if we don't get to the questions, please go on our forums, forum.webflow.com. Most of our team is on there, especially the customer support team. So if we have the answer, we'll let you know. All right. 4 upvotes from, hopefully I'm saying your name right, Wout, saying forms. There are many requests in the wish list about better forms. CAPTCHA, upload form, separate email per form, etc. to generate leads and gather data. These features are pretty crucial. Any timeline on this?
Yes. First time I can actually share is going live today.
CAPTCHA is going live today. Yay!
Yeah. Or if everything goes smoothly, but worst case scenario, it's going live tomorrow or something like that.
Nice.
The only limitation on there is because it requires a server-side component as well, is that it'll only work on Webflow hosted forms, including on free plans, as long as they're on the webflow.io or on. That workflow is a little bit, I don't want to say tedious, but you have to go to Google, get a CAPTCHA kind of site key and secret key and paste them into our dashboard, then go add a CAPTCHA control to your form. And you have to enable CAPTCHA, just the way that it works, you have to enable it across all of your forms. Usually people just have one or two forms, like a contact form and a sales lead form or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you site, you have to have a CAPTCHA control on each form of that site. So it's either all or nothing for now. And that sort of related to the separate email per form thing, because right now all of our forms are kind of tied together. We're looking into that part. For upload form, it's also something we have in development. We still have to kind of battle test it. Most of the development is done. We're starting a early beta soon, I believe. I think this week or next week. And we have to see kind of what the usage patterns of that are, because the files end up being pretty big. We have to store them. There's like GDPR concerns or constraints where we can't. We have to make sure like all the data is stored very securely. That one should be coming like this or next month, general availability. We're not quite sure yet how it's going to be, what plan it's going to be included on. We have to figure out during beta feedback around what kind of use cases it enables. So we're trying to decide if it's going to be on our CMS plan or the business hosting plan. It just depends on us to host those files and deliver them, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Glad to hear about CAPTCHA. Yeah. All right. Let's go to Craig. Craig is asking any update on full functionality for multi-reference items in CMS, and I think you already answered this. I'm guessing. Full functionality.
I don't know what full functionality means, but we are adding I believe there's filtering coming or conditional visibility coming based on the fields of a multi-reference collection.
Oh, okay, nice.
I was just looking into, but I'm not quite sure. So, Craig, I think it'd be awesome to get more detail on what you mean by full.
Yeah. All right. Next one from. Wait. Oh, okay. I'm like, hey, I know this person. From Andrew, one of our customer success specialists. He's asking, what's an awesome book you're reading or something you would recommend for aspiring or professional designers?
Good question. Lately I've been reading a lot of fiction, so I won't share those recommendations. There's a book called Making Users Awesome.
Ooh. Which
is a fun, quick read. One of my favorites, let's see, what else did I read recently? Read a book called Principles by Ray Dalio, which is really awesome. It's just like broadly applicable, not just for designers, but just in general. Yeah, I'm kind of like bought by that one. Andrew, you know we have a Slack, right? Just ask. We have a books channel. But yeah, that's a kind of caught me off guard. Oh, there's one by Ala. I forget her last name. It starts with a K, but it's called Design Systems, I believe, which is something that I recently read as inspiration for a design systems around components, which is like a huge upgrade to our symbols feature. But that's a good one if you want to start thinking about how to organize your website or product in a very components first versus just like pages where you're making a bunch of design changes individually, but just starting to think at a broader level of how do I create kind of like a hierarchy and a collection of components that are interchangeable and composable.
Yeah.
Kind of thinking of your design as a system, because the more complex your website gets, the more complex your project gets, the more you benefit from thinking in kind of zooming out and not thinking about atoms, but now starting to think about like molecules or a collection of nodes and styles to like the even bigger things like entire sections, etc.
Right. Thank you for those. Yeah, it's kind of a detour.
Thanks, Benjamin, for posting those links. Those are exactly the ones I'm talking about.
Cool. Here we go. Answer that. I'm not sure. Do you want to take this one from Tammy? How many percentages of Webflow projects are done by freelancers? Are you talking about like marketing or you want?
Most. I would say most of our users are freelancers, so I would say most projects are done by freelancers.
Oh, okay. By the community as a whole, how many projects are done as freelancers? Yeah, most of them.
Yeah.
Here you go. Let's see here. Tammy's asking, okay, I'll take this other one from Tammy. Will there be Webflow for mobile apps? And I think you've answered this in the past.
Eventually, probably. But that's not our focus right now.
Yeah. All right. Scrolling all the way back to the top. We're going with Dimitri. Okay. This looks like a good one. Will it be ever possible to use Webflow in third-party apps and systems as a WYSIWYG editor component? For example, for editing emails or React Native apps layouts and controls, or edit design systems for large, mid, or large-scale IT products?
There's a lot of questions there.
Yeah.
Emails, I think talking to anybody who has to edit emails today for any sort of marketing is just anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
Email clients are so far behind in terms of what they, what kind of markup they support, what kind of CSS they support. So this is a pretty big question mark. Like emails, I don't know. I've heard some things about, for example, Gmail supporting full-on CSS, but that seems to not be going too far. So we haven't committed to doing anything in email land just because it's so, the constraints are so different. Like everything has to be tables, everything has to, there are some tools out there or some companies that focus specifically on email, but none quite with the design control that Webflow gives you, and probably for good reason, because a lot of clients just don't support that kind of functionality. And there's some the things that you might expect if you want like full real preview of what a email looks like. You're gonna have to add on tool like entire businesses like litmus just to test what an email looks like in multiple different email clients, because it's just so hard to reproduce having multiple email clients. So to give like true WYSIWYG type of control for emails is just like such a daunting problem. But I think that the company that solves it first is going to have a nice little prize for doing so. It just might be easier to kind of like wait out all the email, honestly, without just going kind of into full on painful development land to make it happen. For third-party apps, it's just in order to teach Webflow, like we have things like a Webflow University where there's a bunch of videos. We have kind of the mind share around Webflow. So if you have a Webflow question, you can just Google, Webflow custom embed or something like that.
Yeah.
When it's integrated into other apps, you lose that entire ability to do that. And Webflow is very, very complex. Like there's a lot of different parts to the platform. So it's probably quite unlikely for Webflow to be like white labeled into some other product, just because there's so many things around Webflow that are required to make it possible to go from sort of ideation to design to development to launching in production. So we feel it would probably be like only a slight slice of what Webflow in the exporter piece to apply it to those other contexts. We are really thinking about like how do we make it possible. One thing I mentioned about design systems and components is we're trying to think around how can we facilitate a lot more of those workflows while not fundamentally changing the nature of the product. So it's possible, like if you can think about symbols today and a future version of what will replace symbols, that you'll be able to design create entire design systems and have those be compiled to React components or Vue components or Angular components or whatever. So there are avenues to where we can work more closely with larger or larger scale IT products and teams, while not fundamentally changing the nature of the product to where it becomes like a code editor or an IDE or something like that.
Yeah.
So this is a very broad question, but we have no immediate plans to kind of make it a third-party available thing, I guess.
Cool. Yeah. Let's see here. Ooh, from two upvotes from Peter, asking, organizing the assets library, folders, etc. would be so good when working with 400 plus photos. Yes, I've gone through this myself.
I hear you. This is kind of goes back to that, or where there's so many things we want to improve, and all these things take time. We have new designs for Asset Manager, which are amazing, but because it would take 3-4 months to develop, it would delay prioritization game based on how we chose to structure our business, which is not to go into debt, to solve for sustainability, solve for like consistent growth, both on the team and revenue side. But this is one of those things where we would love to, or like it's kind of up there on the roadmap, but not quite in the, like working on it now. So yeah, we want to improve it too. Believe me, we are doing some foundational work right now to combine kind of our two different ways of thinking about assets. Because right now we have, which they're kind of both in the designer, but they're not really linked together.
Yeah.
So we're working on detangling those to where an asset is an asset, right? So if you, let's say, uploaded your company logo into the asset manager, and then you're editing something in, I don't know, a blog post, you're able to use that same exact asset. You don't have to re-upload it. That's step number one. Like that's something we have to do for this. We've been mentioning. It also normalizes a better solution for responsive images and things like that. But no promises yet on the actual UI for the asset manager.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's a big one, especially with people who like have a photography based business, or they're, yeah. So let's keep going. Man, you answered 23 questions. I think this is a new record for you. All right, let's keep going. From Ryan, any light feature coming that allows us to delete multiple media assets at once instead of one at a time? Oh, yeah. This goes back to Assets Manager.
Yeah, first time I hear that specific feature, but that could be. We have something flow now, which is pretty awesome, where Friday afternoons, anyone on the team can just work on whatever small feature or enhancement that they want. Like capture actually happened that way, and some other stuff that like page search, etc. But this might be, I'll bring this up in our special project channel just to pitch it as an idea, because it could be something that's relatively quick. The challenge with deleting assets is that Webflow has versions. So, you know, when you upload an image, for example, and then saved version, and then you keep working, and then you delete that image and you save it, then your kind of like list of backups. When you go back to the original one, your expectation is that the image is still there. So, and we have some mechanism to like fully delete images, like in the cases where we get, you know, copyright requests or something like that. Or designers ask us like, hey, I accidentally uploaded some PDF that has sensitive information. Can you please completely delete it from your servers? Which actually happens when you delete your entire site. But the complication is with backups and versions, because you want those versions to stay there. That means when you delete an asset, we have to like get confirmation, because it's going to disappear from the asset manager, but not really from that site in case you roll back to an older version. So there are like a lot of kind of edge casey workflows there that we have to think about. But this is definitely something that I can kind of pitch to the team as a potential quick win or light feature.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Keep it going with Wilson, 2 upvotes. Do you see further integrations with platforms like Zapier that will allow for more powerful solutions even beyond what Webflow is built to do? Zapier is really powerful in my opinion, but what other integrations could you think about?
It's a good one. I mean, there's still a lot of things that we don't expose to Zapier, which I think we can expand on. You know, when e-commerce comes out, order placed or something like that.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, we love Zapier. We are friends with the founders of that company. They're just amazing. It's an amazing crew. We have a similar methodology on like remote. Just the way that we build our companies for is kind of rack up capitalist or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be great to know about specific integrations that you like to help us more concretely think about what we should be adding, and which is a great place for that. But we only see our partnership with Zapier expanding over time. Or kind of similar API glue, like MuleSoft, etc. We don't have exact plans to work with them yet, just because Zapier covers so many use cases. It's much more approachable in terms of pricing. But yeah, it's harder to answer the question with more powerful solutions mean.
Yeah. I mean, Zapier is super powerful. And now that you mentioned e-commerce, I mean, I bet you customers would love it. Some sort of text message confirmation that their order's been placed or it's been shipped or something like that. I don't know what the future is for e-commerce and how it integrates with Zapier, but just thinking that off the top of my head, I'm glad that e-commerce is gonna is gonna integrate with Zapier. So that's freaking awesome.
I can't speak to exactly which integrations we'll have with Zapier at Ecommerce general launch, but it just makes sense that would expand our scope. I think my favorite, what I would like to see integrated in Zapier for e-commerce is just like and this is a just disclaimer, it's a joke. I have to say that because it's a public thing. But like every order that comes through, you just skim a penny off the. That'd be a great Zapier.
Is this an Office Space reference?
Yeah.
Oh god. Yeah, no one's going to take this out of context whatsoever. All right. With 4 votes from Ken, will there be a new price plan for e-commerce? Great question.
And one that we haven't answered yet, honestly. We're doing a bunch of surveying and kind of talking to a lot of different constituents, even people who aren't doing e-commerce yet. We're talking to a lot of small businesses to see the kind of value that our e-commerce offering provides. Like, for example, you'll get a lot of what you get in Shopify basic out of the box with some even advanced stuff. Plus, we have visual editing, which in Shopify requires, an extra $40 plan. There's like external third-party vendors that add some level of visual customization that is nowhere near Webflow. So there's definitely a lot of value provided, but we also want to make it more accessible. So that's something where we're still what it's going to look like. Ideally, it's something that won't require the creation of a brand new plan or something like that, but and aligns well with the kind of value that's provided. Now we're still trying to figure things out. There might be some things more advanced stuff like Amazon fulfillment that as we scale, just like Shopify or just like they have multiple tiers of different e-commerce features and settings and things that are available. We will probably have something similar over time, especially as we build out that functionality, because e-commerce is going to be something where we're going to be investing in it for many, many, many years. It's not like one of those things that you just like build and forget. There's always something to add on. I mean, we're trying to catch up on, in some case, decades of too early to tell. I wish I could say, it's going to be included on everything. It's going to be free. But it just, some things are not realistic. And I've said this many, many times, we want to be fair, but we're also optimizing for becoming like you mentioned, like a lasting company. And the way that we help funds to Webflow is creating a great product that provides value that people are willing to pay for. And are happy to pay for. So we want to make sure that like what people need and what we provide is a fair exchange of value and money. So that's still a big open thing that we're going through a bunch of. And we're not just talking to Webflow users. We're also doing a lot of surveys across just a broad range of freelancers, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, larger agencies, et cetera, just to see where Webflow falls in terms of pricing.
Okay, yeah. Next one from, let's see here, from John. Yeah, okay, from John. Native accordions, going to add that as a native element would be so helpful.
Yes, I agree. Let's get it up on the wish list. I think it's already in there.
Yeah.
But again, it's something that is, I don't want to say blocked, but something that is dependent on our new plugin API, which we're actively working on right now.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, right now there's like, what is it? The Digital Bake by Aaron and some other UI kits that you can do cross-site copy paste, where you can just clone their site for free that has a bunch of these already pre-made components, and you can just copy them from there and paste it into your own project. So, I mean, that's a step towards it. But yeah, a native accordion would be also helpful. All right. So we answered that. Let's get like the last 5 questions. I think you have time for the last 5 questions here. We'll go back to Jordan, unless you already answered both the ability for us designers to build multilingual sites.
Yep, working on it.
Yep. So that one's already worked on. Have you ever considered making the Webflow designer along the lines of, say, for example, Adobe products where you can drag the panels around? Ooh, yeah. Please answer this one. Yeah, I've had this idea ever since I started playing around with Webflow, like to have the panels on the right. Like if I have a ultra wide screen, or if I have 2 screen monitors, can I have one with the canvas and my other external monitor have like the panels? Can we do some sort of pop out or something?
Yeah, there's a lot of limitations that we're faced with as a browser tab.
Yeah.
We've considered kind of making parts of Webflow available, or Webflow available offline or on your desktop, as more control over what we can do. Mm-hmm. But it's a little, I mean, we have something that we're considering where you can actually rearrange stuff on within the browser tab, so you can't like pop stuff out, but kind of like in Photoshop, you can arrange tablets around. It hasn't been a huge priority. I know for some of the style tab changes we're making, and for a future components product, we are adding more flexibility for how to think about like you're seeing your navigator while you're actually styling things, because you might want both things contextually as you're making those changes. So we're thinking about a lot of that stuff. Like the challenge there is, how much do we change the UI? Keep it possible to teach Webflow it kind of predictably, where it's not like really mess up to get your designer into a state where you just lost control of all of your panels. A big project that we had last year to migrate everything to React actually helped make a lot of this stuff easier, just because there's a lot of precedent for having kind of very flexible UI. We are poised to kind of make those changes as we prioritize them, but right now it's not like super high on the list.
Yeah. All right. Hopefully that answers your question, Graham, and answered mine. We're going to Max. Any chance to see an easy export as CSV feature for collections to help convincing clients to host with Webflow? If you're exporting, then you're not hosting with Webflow.
Well, I think this is like more of a peace of mind thing. Like, you can already export all of your data if you have a developer just using our API. We're not like holding on to it just because we don't want you to leave. But I think we have. I have to look into this. But for e-commerce, we have a way to export orders and edit them and re-import them back. But I have to look exactly whether that actually covers the regular collection use case. Yeah, there's nothing really, since when you're exporting CSV, a lot of edge cases around the formats we support. Like, for example, if you export a bunch of converts it to HTML, which I'm not quite sure how it gets stored in CSV, but I'm sure there's a way to like format it. Mm-hmm. But then when you re-import it back, you actually lose some of the changes that you made, just because it's so hard to make that in kind of like the baked HTML version. You lose things like export to CSV. I think it's just a matter of like seeing the demand for it, and I can see it being more important for like peace of mind versus like a practical use case where you're like exporting and importing and exporting and importing just to make changes. And I do see a lot of advantage to, if you have a bunch of in enabling other use cases where potentially, maybe you want to analyze your blog posts or products or something like that, and having an easy way to get that as a download. Mm-hmm. Moving everything to some other platform or whatever in most cases.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Max, for that one. I think 2 more, and we'll be good. You know what? Let's see. From Jason. Here we go. From Jason asking, any more thoughts on faceted search? Will e-commerce have this feature?
So faceted search, for folks who don't know exactly what it is, it's sort of the ability to narrow down. I don't know if you've seen kind of like an Amazon list of products.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, Newegg or something like that, where you say, I only want to see products that are less than $300, etc. Mm-hmm. We actually do not plan to launch it with e-commerce v1. Unfortunately, it's a very complicated feature to build out correctly. So yeah, it's not going to be part of the initial scope, although we do plan to add it at some point. Do launch it, we want to make it available not just for e-commerce, but just generally for any type of collection data, because faceted search requires multiple different, like you need a special page or a special control that somehow links to a result set, and then a lot of different controls depending on the fields that you use in your CMS. Mm-hmm. Something that's a number field has a different, you might want to represent that as an input or a slider or as a price range type of control. So there's a lot of thought that goes into faceted search, and unfortunately we just didn't have the time to slide that into version 1 scope.
Yeah. All right, we'll take, I think you have time for 2 more, so let's just take 2 more. Let's see here. We already did. I want to try to someone who hasn't asked a question yet. Robert, we've already answered that one with CAPTCHA. That's launching today or tomorrow. CMS tabs and sliders. Yeah, do you want to talk about CMS? Whoa, where'd the question go? Did it get upvoted? Oh, there it goes. Yeah. I'll start answering that one right here. Amit is asking, any news on CMS tabs and sliders? Because right now there's only a workaround where you would have to like put a collection list in each tab or slider. But
yeah, same thing I said about sliders before in Lightboxes. It's our intent is to make both of those CMS capable. But we have to do it within the constraints of our new plugin API, the one that we're developing right now for e-commerce and for CMS Gallery. So that is on the horizon. I just don't have any concrete news for it.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. Last one. Who should I give it to? You know what? You have the questions list right there, right? You wanna,
I do.
Do you want to just pick a random one, or just take the top or the bottom? Your call.
Subscription-based products. So we don't plan to. I'll kind of blast through some of these.
Okay.
We don't plan to cover subscription. So that's a very complicated. A company called Cratejoy, which is amazing at this. So for V1, our e-commerce will not support subscriptions because there's just a lot that goes into subscriptions. But we don't know if in the future it'll be a major use case. Probably will be, but we're not sure at what point.
Mm-hmm. All right. What keeps you up at night?
Last night, my daughter, because she had one of my daughters has an ear infection.
Oh.
She was unfortunately up most of the night. Poor thing.
Oh man. Dad life. Yeah. CAPTCHA, we already said that.
Will Ecom give us the ability to style receipts sent to clients? Yes, there will be some limited design control over receipts, not to the point that you kind of expected with Webflow, where you can like drag in a div block and add any class you want, just because there's a lot of limitations with email, but it'll have the kind of control where you can add a custom logo, design color, so that it'll be pretty dang awesome.
Right.
Let's see.
Quick fire.
Today.
Let's see here.
Oh, CSS Calc. Actually, the CSS Calc function, I definitely want to add to Webflow on the wish list. I wish more people knew about it, but it gives you pretty awesome control. Now that we actually didn't implement it at first in Webflow in the first version, just because quite a few browsers that were popular at the time didn't support it. But now we're at nearly universal support for browsers, minus some fringe IE stuff. So that is something like we just have to figure out the UI around, because we just don't want it to be like you just type it in. At first, we might just make it available so you can type something in manually, but we want to make it possible for you to actually kind of get like autocomplete, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get this last one. I don't want you to be late for anything else past 11:30. So let's get one last one.
I think this one's kind of important. And I know it comes up all the time. Why don't you add expected delivery dates on the Webflow wish list? Prevents us asking the same questions every quarter. I wish we lived in a world where we can just like estimate software, like, okay, this is exactly how long it's going to take, and this is when we're going to ship a specific feature. It's just like fundamentally, I believe, given the constraint, given that company priorities change, given that like staffing changes, given market trends, etc., new things that come up, it's just like somebody going on, like a lead engineer on a project going on paternity leave for 3 months or something like that. There's just a lot of things you can't predict, and we don't operate the kind of company where we put a stake in the ground. Let's say we were to say e-commerce is going to ship in June, end of this month, and then shipping a bad product just because we committed to a date. That would be the temptation if we share dates. And I think this is the struggle of just software in general, the entire industry. It's very hard without knowing all of the unknowns, which, like, how do you know the unknowns until you uncover them, to put something out there. So like the options are pick some wild date that's way out there that just sounds kind of like, well, why even announce a date while it's that far out, or set something that So our approach is we focus on, even though we have internal targets, dates that we're shooting for, and that we're trying to operate against, we operate in a way where we're like constantly uncovering unknowns and getting to closer and closer to like a launchable thing. And constantly we have this framework, we call it the RDA framework, where you either rework scope to like keep your original date, defer it, which means that we just have no choice but to given the features that we want to build and the new information that was unlocked or uncovered, just defer that date, or abandon. Like sometimes it makes sense to abandon a project because we've spent 3 months on it, and it's just like we keep getting into roadblocks and unknowns. So as much as it would be awesome to put like target dates on the wish list, I just can't think of just realistically thinking about the last 5 years and just software delivery in general. What we can do is talk about in broad strokes, like we do in our Q&As, and like we signal on our wish list, like things that are in development, which are accurate. I think that's the sort of the middle ground, where what the top priorities for us are and what we're currently working on, and that those things are going to go live sooner than like things that aren't in development, for example. But it's just not. I feel it's not really realistic to be able to set dates without disappointing, because like there's a huge risk of over-promising and under-delivering. We'd rather under-promise and over-deliver. So hopefully that makes sense.
Cool. That totally makes sense. So that means e-commerce will launch when someone lands on Mars? No.
I can guarantee that's going to happen sooner.
Yeah.
The e-commerce thing, not the Mars thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Vlad. You went through new record, 36 questions. Wow.
You know what? We can probably make it 40 if I just
Right? You want to keep going?
Yes. Is there an approximate time frame for a component section marketplace? No.
Oh, wow.
So we are actually right now we're sort of distributing possible with cross-site copy paste. So definitely encourage you to go into the forum where a lot of these things are shared via show and tell. We're also sharing on webflow.com/discover. Get featured there or get shared as components that you can drop into your site. But the actual like official component section marketplace will be after we have some sort of more foundational things built, which we don't have an ETA for.
Okay.
Hope that you're. Let's see. So capture we already answered. Domain we already answered. Cascading styles from a parent class to elements like class name H2. We do have that right now already. Rich content, like a rich text block, give it a class, and then click on an H2 inside, and then click on the when inside of selector, and it'll create one of those types of selectors.
Yep.
And then we want to understand more around those edge like those in cases to expand that that functionality to other sort of like class inside of a class. Yeah. But we have some surprises coming with building components where that'll become less necessary, and it'll be built in a way that is less likely to collide with styles.
Yeah. Okay. And he's still going, ladies and gentlemen.
Webflow, talk a little about the Webflow masterclass. I don't know if there is a.
I think he's talking about RANs.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we have the Webflow University. There's some stuff coming up on Skillshare that is sort of independent. But I wonder, it would be great to know masterclass. Like, is this like a week-long thing, a month-long thing? Like, would you would the community like to see like a book written on Webflow with basically the ins and outs of everything it does? So I like to see in a master class, because now that we have an education team, it's definitely something that we're always considering on expanding. Like, how do we make Webflow easier to learn? How do we make the community be able to not but give all of you the resources to teach it to others, and where we can, whether it's through sponsorship or through doing things natively on our own team, education experience into the platform, because I think that's one of the biggest barriers for Webflow, is because it's so powerful. It does require quite a bit of a learning curve, and the more we can bring that down, the better. So it'd be great to hear from you all on what you would expect from something like that. If you were just starting out from scratch today, what would help you get over that initial learning curve to really inspire you to take it to the next level and learn Webflow as your go-to tool for web design?
Yeah. I would like a kindergarten pop-up book, and when you move things around, sound comes out. We should get the audio files from our university, or at least have McGuire do some recordings to make it more fun for the children, because it's fun for us already. So I would like that for my little one. Get them started early. I think I don't want to hold you too long, and so
one last thing. I'll
okay.
Answer this one. The future of mobile editor on tablets and devices.
Yes.
We know it sucks right now that we don't support, at least natively, those workflows, even as like a web app. So we're doing a lot of work right now to harmonize our editor with the same code. And that paves the way to like first class mobile support for the CMS and the Webflow editor. So it's coming. I don't know when, but we know it sucks. Like, we use the editor all the time, and it's just something that is a clear what we have and what we should have. So yeah, that'll make it 40, right?
Did he get to 40? Yes. So you're gonna have to do 60 next time.
Let's keep him short next time.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Vlad. Thank you for letting us speak to you directly. I know the community really loves these quarterly Q&As. So next quarter, let's go for another stream and answer more questions, yeah?
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Quarters come fast these days.
Excuse me?
The quarters come fast these days. Seems like we just had the last one.
I know. You blink and then it's quarter 3. You blink again and then it's Webflow's 10 years old.
Yeah, and you blink again. Like, I just realized my oldest daughter is halfway to high school.
Jeez.
And she was really young when we started Webflow. So.
Oh, man.
Time flies. Yeah. Enjoy every day, folks.
Yes.
Spend time with your families and build awesome stuff.
Yay. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Vlad.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
See ya. Take care. All right. Let's go here. Yeah. That was fun. That's a lot of information, and it's really nice that he went overtime. Usually he only stays for an hour, but he said, I can go for another 30 minutes. And then he just wanted to hit that number of 40 questions answered. So there you go. And again, if your question wasn't answered, please go on the forum.webflow.com, and ask it there. The team, also Vlad, is on that forum too. So we will answer it as best as we can. I'll even ping Vlad if there's something that you really want to get to him and see if he can answer it. No guarantees though, but yeah, go forum.webflow.com, join the community of developers and designers, introduce yourself, and to everyone in the live chat room right now on YouTube, Facebook, and Crowdcast, thank you so much for being here. Hopefully you had fun. These live Q&A sessions happen every quarter. I'll announce the next date after I schedule it with Vlad for the next live Q&A. But if you're new to these streams happen every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/webflow, or you can just stand by for our community, or you can stand by for our Crowdcast links by following us on Crowdcast or following us on Twitter, which is twitter.com/webflow app. You can also check us out on Instagram, Webflow app, and facebook.com/webflow. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's @thepixelgeek. And I think that's about it. So thank you everyone for being here. And last note, and I know people were talking about in the live chat room, what's up with the audio? I was testing this morning and some weird Windows error kept showing up, and I actually unplugged everything and replugged everything back one by one. And I'm like, okay, I don't see the error anymore. And then this happened. But, technical issues. I'm sorry. I'll figure it out next time. But I will see you next week, bright and early at 10 a.m. Tuesday. And until then, make the web beautiful. See ya.